Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's go ahead and start since everybody all nice and quiet. We are still in Genesis. Yay, yes. But we're making pretty good headway, actually. Once you get past those first three chapters, the rest of it just kind of flows a little better. So we are in Genesis. We are starting chapter 20, but anybody remember what happened last week? And last part of 18 and all of 19? Soap opera, yes. As the sulfur burns. No, that's okay. I'll just tell you since you're not going to offer. So we discussed Abraham pleading for Sodom, bargaining down from 50 people down to 10, hoping that, oh yeah, surely Lot, his wife, his two daughters, sons-in-law, and then their in-laws. Surely that would be 10 people. We should be fine. Nope. How many did he end up with? 4. And so the cities got destroyed, including Sodom and Gomorrah. Zoar was not destroyed because Lot went to Zoar. Lot and his family ran to Zoar. They were safe. The fire comes down from heaven. And what happens to Mrs. Lot? We never know her name. We just have to call her Mrs. Lot. What happened to Mrs. Lot? Turned to a pillar of salt. Yes, because she looked back longingly. She was safe. She was with her family. She was where God wanted her to be. But she looked back longingly, wanting to go back to Sodom. And God said, no, we're not going to have any of that, and turned her into a pillar of salt. Not sure why salt other than anything else, but maybe there's a scientific reason for that. Anyway, she turns to a pillar of salt. And Lot, who had bargained to be able to get to Zoar and stay in the city because going to the mountains would just kill him. Never mind the rest of the family. It would have just killed him to go to the mountains. Where's he end up? In the mountains. Yeah, because if he stayed around Zoar, he was the sole survivor of this thing. People were probably looking at him like, okay, did you like the match or what? So he ends up there, and his daughters come up with a plan to have children, and they have children through Lot, which ends up causing problems for Israel later, people of Israel later. Now we are back to Abraham, all right? And in chapter 20, this may sound a little familiar to you. And when we get to Isaac, it's really going to sound familiar to you. But chapter 20, verse 1. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abraham said to his wife Sarah, she is my sister. Of his wife Sarah, she is my sister. Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. All right, so let's get the little pointy thing out here. So Abraham is starting up here around Hebron, okay, kind of in the middle of the Dead Sea area. And he goes all the way down here to Kadesh into the south and lives for a while. Then he moves back up here into Gerar, which is Philistine country. Now, at this point, the Philistines and the Hebrews have no problem with each other. All right, it's not until later history that Samson has to come in and take them out. So he's up here in Gerar, in Philistine country. And Sarah is beautiful. Remember, we had this problem in Egypt. And Abraham says, they're going to kill me if, for Sarah. How much faith is that really showing that Abraham has in God? Not much. Okay, remember, God has promised him that he will have a child through him, and that child will inherit land. Okay, so Abraham is going to stay alive. Sarah can die, as far as he knew at this point. Sarah could die, but Abraham could stay alive. Now, The thing about chapter 20 is this. We don't know when this happens. It's not in the right place in the story. Because what was the promise to Abraham and Sarah way back in chapter 18? What? Become a great nation within what time period? Sarah's going to have a child, right? Within a year of that time. So if this happens after Sodom and Gomorrah, after God has had that conversation with Abraham, you only have a year there. Well, it takes time to move from Hebron down into the southern part. And then it takes more time to get back up into Gerar. And then a little bit longer. What is going to be happening to Sarah if she's pregnant? What?
She's gonna look pregnant eventually.
She's going to look pregnant. And that never comes up in here. You would think after about 3 or 4 months, Abimelech would get suspicious. Either she's getting fat, which I don't want to say anything because then that'd be embarrassing, or she's pregnant. And that would kill the whole thing. So this is not in the right spot. This happened some other time. Probably, definitely before this final word from God that Sarah will have a child within a year. Okay. Now you say, well, how can they do that? That's just not telling the story right. Remember, we're talking about a culture that is an oral tradition culture. And within that culture, as they present oral traditions, especially history, they have to have everything right. They have to have their facts right. So this did happen. It's not something they made up. But they don't necessarily have to put it in the right place. Okay? As Westerners, that irritates the daylights out of us because we think history has to be this, this, this. But when they related history, while they related the facts correctly, they usually did it to make a point, to bring out some specific point that this historical event teaches us. And I think chapter 20 is going to teach us something about faith that is needed in chapter 21. Okay? So, Abraham's running up and down, and now he's there, and he's with King Abimelech of Gerar. And Sarah has been taken by the king, okay, because she is beautiful. And Abraham once again said, she's my sister, which is not a complete untruth, but it's not the truth either. So, verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, you are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman. And he's going, see, I've got this one, this one. Which one? Now, Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And didn't she also say, he is my brother? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands. Then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, and so I've kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all who belong to you will die. All right, so God comes to Abimelech. Isn't that interesting? Abraham was not the only person that God spoke to. Melchizedek was not the only person that God spoke to. He is now speaking to Abimelech, a Philistine king. So once again, we see that this area, Canaan, had representatives of God in it. Okay? Because Abimelech doesn't seem, like it's anything too different that God's talking to him. Again, maybe he just had voices in his head all the time. Who knows? So God comes to Abimelech in a dream and says, hey, you're going to die because of the woman you took as a wife. And yeah, he may have had several wives, but I think he knew exactly who God was talking about. In fact, he had to know, because then he says, Wait, God, don't kill. I'm innocent of this. He knew exactly God was talking about Sarah. I'm innocent in this. They both told me that they were sister and brother. How was I supposed to know? I mean, I can't get their birth certificates. So God says, calm down, Abimelech. I know what they did to you. And that's why I made sure that you did not touch Sarah. He says, now, if you'll return her, then I will have Abraham, who is a prophet, pray for you. We're going to find out in a little bit why he needed prayer. I'll have my man Abraham pray for you. Okay. But if not, then you and everybody who's associated with you is going to die. Okay. Verse 8. Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all of his officials. And when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. So they had a fear of God. Isn't that interesting? They had a fear of God. And they had more faith that God would carry out his threat, and Abraham had that God would carry out his promise. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, what have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should never be done. I think he's a little mad, just a little bit. And Abimelech asked Abraham, what was your reason for doing this? What are you thinking? You're giving away your wife? Abraham replied, I said to myself, and there was his first problem. He was thinking, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. So she's a half sister. So I guess they can only have half a marriage. Anyway, and when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, this is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother. There is something just absolutely wrong with that statement. This is how you can show your love to me. Tell them that you're my sister so that I stay alive, but they can rape you all they want to. That's pretty much what he said. They can take you as a wife. I don't care as long as I'm alive. Very selfish. Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham. And he returned Sarah, his wife, to him. So Abimelech did nothing wrong. And yet he is making restitution for taking Sarah. And Abimelech said, my land is before you. Live wherever you like. Just get out of my sight. To Sarah, he said, I'm giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. He had more concern for Sarah's reputation than Abraham did. He says, I'm giving you 1,000 pieces of silver to let people know that you did nothing wrong. You are vindicated. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves, so they could have children again. For the Lord had kept all the women in Abimelech's household from conceiving because of Abraham's wife, Sarah. So this had been a little bit of time there, enough time that they realized that nobody was having children. And Abraham then prays to God because Sarah has been returned to him. He prays and heals them. So Abimelech and Abraham, Abimelech, we see his wrath in verses 8 through 10, rightful wrath against Abraham. Abraham's weak response. I didn't think anybody knew about God here. Oh, yeah. The restitution paid to Abraham and for Sarah to show that she is still, she did nothing wrong. and then the prayer of Abraham to heal what God had done to the people there. So that was the lapse, an instance of a lapse of faith again for Abraham on the promise. And now in chapter 21, we're going to start seeing the fulfillment of the promise. Verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. So this is referring back to chapter 17, 19 through 22, and 18, 10 through 12, where God is speaking to Abraham first, saying, within a year, Sarah will have a son. And then 18, 10 through 12, saying it loud enough so Sarah would hear it. Okay. Remember what their reactions were? Laughter. Yes. They laughed. And so the son will be called Isaac, which means laughter, or he laughs. Verse 3. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. He laughs. Okay, so that fulfills 17:19, where he was told, this is what you're going to call your son. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. So going back to 17:12, we had this command to sacrifice. No, circumcise the children the males at 8 days old. So Abraham follows this with Isaac. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. So he was 99 when he was told he's going to have a son. Now he's 100 years old. So that also fulfills the promise. And Abraham is probably going 3 a.m. feedings and, trying to chase after this kid when he gets to be I'm not sure I'm up for this. Here's Sarah's reaction. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter. She uses Isaac's name as a way of saying, yes, he has brought me laughter, not just a child, but this joy within me. God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So this stigma that Sarah has had for 90 years is finally gone. She has a child. She has been able to bear a child for Abraham. And not just a child, but a male child who can take over and inherit everything Abraham has. Now the child grew and was weaned. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share an inheritance with my son, Isaac. Okay, here we go, back to the soap opera again, as the stomach churns. So it is a big deal when the kid is weaned, okay? And so Abraham has a feast. Now, the weaning could take place anywhere from 2 years to 5 years old, okay? So Isaac, or Ishmael, who, remember, he was born when Abraham was 86 years old. Abraham's now 100. That's 14. You give it a couple more years for weaning. So at the very least, Ishmael is 16 years old. And for some reason, he feels the need to taunt a toddler. So Ishmael is mocking Isaac. But you know what? He's just staying true to the character God said he would have. Remember, he was going to be a wild donkey. He's not going to look like a donkey. He's going to be a wild donkey. He's going to be against all of his brothers. And face it, Isaac is a brother. So he is just living up to this, being a nuisance, being angry at people. But, honestly, can we blame Ishmael? For 16 years, he has been the son who would be inheriting everything as far as he knew. He was the primary son. He was the firstborn of Abraham. And now here comes this little squirt, and he's going to be getting everything. I think I would be mad too and upset. So Sarah gets upset. Sarah is almost always upset. The only time we didn't see her upset was just a couple of verses ago where she was happy. Every other time she's kind of upset. Here we go again. Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. So Hagar, this Egyptian slave, remember how Ishmael came about in the first place? Sarah decided, oh, God said you're going to have a son. I can't give you a son. So let's go back to the way humans do it now, which is I will give you my slave, Hagar. You have a child through her, and that child will be mine. Technically, Ishmael should have been considered Sarah's child. No. Isaac's here. Ishmael is not my child. He's just the child of this slave over here, this woman. So she says, get rid of her. Get rid of that slave woman and her son. So that tells you right there what she thinks of Hagar and Ishmael. They're just slaves. No more than slaves. And once again, this is brought out because when we go back and God was speaking to Abraham about, I'm going to give you this, your people are going to be in the land for 400 years and be slaves. This is why. This is the attitude that was prevalent within the family of Abraham on slavery. That they were just slaves. They were property. You could do whatever you want to with them. And God wants to break them of that because that is not a part of the kingdom of God. So another point God is making as he reveals all this stuff to Moses. Put this in here, Moses. It's important. So Sarah's demanding that Hagar and Ishmael leave. Verse 11. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. Now, we may be wondering why God is just calling Hagar a slave. Because God did not recognize the marriage or even the concubine status of Hagar. She was in the position of slave. She was not property, but she was not a wife. And God did not recognize concubinage either. And so he says, look, go ahead. Ishmael will be fine. Don't worry about Ishmael. Isaac is the son of promise. And you notice something? God isn't just going to say, okay, you got to get out of here. Hagar, Ishmael, you're on your own. No. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. He is going to become a great nation as well, just like Abraham. So God is going to bless Ishmael as much as he does Abraham. Verse 14, early the next morning, Abraham took some bread, took some food, and a skin of water, and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. Okay, let's stop right there. So Abraham, being told by God to do this, went ahead and did it. And he sets the food on whose shoulders?
Hagar.
Hagar. She's still the mama. She is still the mother to Ishmael, even though Ishmael is 16, 17, or even older at this point. She is still the mother. So she takes on the provisions. Verse 3. Abraham gave, go back over here to the one I'm early on, verse 15. Verse 3 is good, but we don't need to read it again. Verse 15, when the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. So they get out there into the wilderness and roaming around, really not going anywhere, it seems like. And the water runs out. And she says, that's it, I give up. And so she has Ishmael sit over here under a bush where he'd have some shade at least. And then she went off about a bow shot, it says, to just wait for him to die. She could not, being his mother, she could not bear to watch him die. He's 16, 17 years old, still cannot bear to watch him die. But this is what people look at and think, oh, well, he must have just been a tiny baby. No, there's no way he was a baby. He was 16, 17 years old, enough to be married and doing things on his own. So she begins to sob. God heard the boy crying. He was crying too. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what's the matter, Hagar? I was like, don't you know? What? Are you clueless? He says, do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up, take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Once again, now he's saying it to Hagar. Your son is going to be a great nation. Just like Abraham's son is going to be a great nation. Isaac is going to be a great nation. They're equal, except Isaac is the son of promise. Now remember something. The promise is not just about land or heirs. The promise is really about God coming to this earth. It is through the line of Isaac that Jesus will come, that God will set up the ability for us to be able to reestablish our relationship with God through Isaac's line, not Ishmael's. So that does not mean that Ishmael cannot have land and riches and everything else and heirs. Isaac, he has the same thing Isaac does physically, but it is the spiritual line that is important. Isaac is the spiritual line. Ishmael is not. Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do the Islams claim Ishmael, though, as a descendant or a relative of Muhammad?
As far as I understand, Islam believes that the promise was through Ishmael, not Isaac. And so anyone who is from Ishmael, which would be the Arab states, including Muhammad, would be a part of that, aligned with that. Yeah. And that's as far as I understand. So if I'm wrong on that,
That's why I heard trying to
Yeah.
sure.
I always hesitate to say what another group believes, because sure as you do, somebody doesn't really believe that. And you've misrepresented them, and that's not fair to them. But I think I've heard that enough that I'm pretty sure about that. Okay, so we have this promise of a great nation. Now, verse 19. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. We have water. We can live. Yay. Verse 20, God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer, which I think it's interesting. He became an archer, and up above it says she was a arrow shot away. Yeah. So he lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Well, of course she did. Where was she from? Egypt. Yeah, we've been told that twice. Back in verse 9, we saw it, and then chapter 16, verse 1, we saw it. So Ishmael comes out okay. They find water. They live in the desert. He becomes an archer, can shoot for food and whatever, and he gets married. And that's where we're going to leave him for right now. Okay, now we're back to Abimelech. This would be probably a different Abimelech than the one Abraham met with earlier, because it seems like everybody was Abimelech, King Abimelech. So it was just all the way down. The king would just take on the title of Abimelech. Verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. Now swear to me here before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or my descendants. You must know Abraham pretty well. Show to me in the country where you now reside as a foreigner the same kindness I've shown to you. Okay? So what he is wanting is a treaty of protection, treaty of non-aggression. I want you to make a treaty with me that you will not attack me, that you won't, I won't wake up dead one day because you attacked me. And you notice who he brought with him? Who did he bring with him? Yeah, the general of the army, of his army. It's like, I want to make a statement here that I have an army, although Abraham defeated 4 very powerful kings with only 300 men, 300 some men. So he's not really giving out much hope here. But he wants to make this treaty with Abraham. Then Abraham said, I swear it. Verse 25. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about this wasn't the same day. Okay, the treaty has been made, and now we're on a little bit further ahead. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. So Abraham had dug a well, and remember, in this area, water is life. We just saw that with Hagar and Ishmael. Water is life. You get water, you're great. If you don't have water, you're in trouble. And so if somebody has water, you want to take it from them. Water rights. And so Abraham has dug this well, but now Abimelech's men have taken it from him. That's not a very good treaty of non-aggression. Verse 26, but Abimelech said, I don't know who's done this. You did not tell me, and I heard about it only today. In other words, I have no recollection. So the problem is he has no recollection, but he's not going to do anything about it either. Verse 27. So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the 2 men made a treaty. So Abraham, in effect, buys the well back from Abimelech. He dug the well, but he's buying it back from him. Abraham wasn't through, though. Now, Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech asked Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart by themselves? He replied, accept these 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well. In other words, Abraham wants him to admit that it was Abraham's well. You guys stole it. I bought it back from you. Abraham is concerned about his character. Doesn't matter that he lies about his wife, but he does not want to lie about wells. Okay? Plus, that could be considered an act of aggression if the well was really Abimelech's and Abraham had infringed on it, like Abimelech was claiming. That would have been a violation of the treaty. And Abraham said, I didn't violate the treaty, and I want you to tell everybody that I did not violate this treaty. Here's seven lambs. So the place was called Beersheba because the two men swore an oath there. So it is called Beersheba. It seems like there's 50 towns in Israel and Canaan. They're called Beersheba because an oath was done there. So the Beersheba means the well of the seven, which would be the seven lambs, or well of the oath. Most of the time it's well of the oath. Okay. So Beersheba is all over the place. After the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So Abraham is at Beersheba up here. Remember, he was up in here in Gerar. Now he's down here in Beersheba. Okay. Now, there is something that struck me as I was going through this week about the well. Abraham dug the well. He created the well. The well was stolen from him. And Abraham paid the price then to get the well back. Does that not ring familiar to anybody about Jesus created us? We were stolen away by our own actions. Jesus paid the price to get us back. I'm not saying that that's a precursor to what, but that's a good picture of what Jesus did for us. He paid to get us back. We were rightfully his possession, and yet he paid to get us back anyway. All right, so Abraham is in Beersheba. And now we're going to get to go. I don't know why it's doing that. The laser pointer went rebellious on me. I cannot get it to stop. All right, so now we're going to get into chapter 22. And this is a chapter that people do not understand. And if their interpretation of it was correct, then they would be right at being angry. But let's really look at this and see what's going on before we jump to conclusions that God is just horrible, okay, and a child abuser. So sometime later, God tested Abraham. So right here we see this is going to be a test for Abraham. So what is God testing Abraham about? I mean, he has faith in God, right? He believes the promises is through Isaac. What is God going to be testing? As we have looked at Abraham's story, outside of this thing with Sarah being his sister, as we look through it, he has always been very strong about family. He loves his family above everything else. He went with his father, moved from his father from Ur of the Chaldees to Haran, which they were supposed to go on to Canaan, but they got to Haran and said, that's far enough. So he moved with his father. He stayed with his father while his brother Nahor stayed in Ur. When Haran died, when Haran passed away, Abraham adopted Lot, basically, and took over, trying to keep him safe, which was a job and a half because he lived in Sodom. So he shows great love towards Lot. I mean, he even went and fought kings to try to get Lot back. He loves Sarah. I mean, he was fine with, okay, Sarah, if it'll make you happy that I have a child through Hagar, I'll do it. Okay, Sarah, if you want me to push Hagar and Ishmael away, I'll do that. Twice. He does love Sarah. Doesn't always show it the right way, but he does love Sarah. He loves his family. His family is most important to him. And God is going to test him right now. Do you love me or your family more? That's what this is all about. Do you love me or your family? So, sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham! Notice it's, yeah. Abraham's over 100 years old at this point. Maybe he couldn't hear very well. And so God had to yell at him. Here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. So, this is after the birth of Isaac. Ishmael is already gone, and he's living in the land he owned. Because remember, he bought the well area, so he stayed there in Beersheba. And God comes to him and says, take your only son. Was Isaac the only son? No, Ishmael was too. But the only son of promise, the only son, the son you love. That tells us this is what the test is. Are you going to love your family more than you love God? So take them to Moriah and do a burnt offering. So Moriah is, there we go, Jerusalem. Okay, it's where the Temple Mount is today. It's where they built the original temple. It's where Dome of the Rock sits now. That is why the Dome of the Rock sits there, is because of this passage of Scripture. Okay, so he's going to be going from Beersheba to Jerusalem, and God says, why did they have an issue? God says, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. God wants a human sacrifice? And I'm sure the first people to hear that are like, what? No, that's not the God we know. And that's why we have this reaction against this event too. That's not the God we know, that there's going to be a human sacrifice. So Abraham's reaction was, no, I don't think I heard right. That's not the God. That must be another God telling me that. I'm not going to do it. That's not what he said, what he did. Verse 3, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. No excuses, no questions. Abraham just gets up and goes. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. So he loaded up the donkey and moved to Beverly. No. He loaded up the first thing the next morning. He saw Moriah. So it took him 3 days to get to where they could see Mount Moriah, okay, or the Moriah Range Mountains, okay? Verse 5. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. What did he say? We're going to worship and then we, both of us, are coming back to you. Now, you could say, well, Abraham's probably saying that because if he said, I'm coming back to you, there would have been questions from the servants and they may not have let him go. I don't think that's what's going on here. In fact, Hebrews 11:19, which is probably the early interpretation of this, says that Abraham believed that even if Isaac was killed, God would raise him from the dead. Isaac was coming back because Isaac was the son of promise. Quite a contrast in faith to, she's my sister. So, verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. See, Isaac isn't a baby here. Isaac is older. He's old enough to carry the wood. So he could have been 13, 20, who knows? He was stronger than Abraham, probably. And he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, Father? Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and wood are here. Where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Father, did you have a senior moment and forget the lamb? See, Abraham was old enough to understand how sacrifices went. He knew you've got 2 out of the 3 components of a sacrifice. Where's the lamb? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. That was sufficient for Isaac. Isn't that amazing? God will provide. Okay. And Abraham believed that God would provide, that this is not going to become a human sacrifice. Verse 9. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, once again yelling because not too good at hearing. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. All right, so they get up there to Mount Moriah and they build an altar, which isn't hard to do because there's so many rocks around in Israel. You just pick up some and throw them together and you have an altar. He put the wood on there and it's all set. And then he bound Isaac. Now, do you think 100-some-odd-year-old guy is going to be able to outdo a 13, 17-year-old kid? I don't think so. So Isaac, okay, go ahead, bind me. Isaac was a willing participant in this. And I think in the back of Isaac's mind, it wasn't, my dad's going to kill me. I'm going to be a sacrifice for God. It was, God will provide. God will provide. And so Isaac's bound, the wood is there. The fire is not lit, thankfully, but the wood is there. And Abraham reaches out his hand. Now, I know every picture I have ever seen of this, Abraham is in this position ready to take him out. That's not what the Hebrew is saying. That's not what this, and this is a good translation of the Hebrew. Abraham reached for the knife to take it. He's in this position, and then the angel yells at him and says, stop. I think God may have been afraid with Abraham's hearing problem that if he waited till he was right here, it may not have stopped. So he's reaching out. So Isaac doesn't have to go through his life with this picture of his father up ready to kill him. It's just reaching out. And the angel says, no, stop. And by the way, the angel, it is God speaking. I swear by myself. Wait a minute, where's this? Yeah. Nope. 12. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me. Withheld from me. That shows it's God, not an angel. Your son, your only son. Once again, this was about, do you love your family more than you love me? Verse 13. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. And that ram had a very bad day. I mean, he's just going along, and all of a sudden his horns are caught in a thicket. He can't get out, and now some guy's coming in with a knife. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. God did provide. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. So God did provide for the sacrifice. And I think instead of it being a time when Isaac says, no, I'm afraid of God because he almost sacrificed me, I think it was a time when it solidified Isaac's faith that God will provide. Now, we don't get much of Isaac's story in here, but we don't see him doubting that God will provide. We will see that he is his father's son later, but he's always with God. Verse 14. Oh, sorry, 15. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham out from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord. So once again, the angel of the Lord is God. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. Now, what if Abraham had made a different choice? I think God knew Abraham wasn't going to make a choice. This was for Abraham's benefit, not God's. Usually, when God tests us, it is to show us what is really inside us, not to show God what's really inside us. He already knows all that. But it is to show us. And this showed Abraham that God was more important than the son, that he had faith that God would provide, even through Isaac. So God swears to uphold the covenant. Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. So Abraham was right. We're going to go worship, and we will come back. They came back, and they moved back to Beersheba. Isaac, returned home. Can you imagine what the conversation would have been like with Sarah if he had actually sacrificed the kid? Well, honey, I forgot the lamb, so, I just used Isaac. She's already an angry woman. That would have been bad. All right, verse 20. Sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Remember, Nahor stayed in Ur. Okay, and Milcah is the give me a second. Here we are. The name of Abraham's, this is chapter 11, verse 29. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran. So Milcah was the daughter of Haran. And Sarai, of course, was Abraham's wife. So Milcah is the niece of Nahor, and they get married. Okay. So Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother. Can you imagine that? Trying to call Uz and Buzz. Poor kids wouldn't know which one was which. Kemuel, the father of Aram, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, I'll get there, Zidleth, and Bethuel. And here comes the most important verse. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. His concubine, who was named Reumah, also had sons, Teba, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. So 8 sons born through Milcah, the wife, 4 through the concubine Reumah. The most important one, though, is Bethuel, father of Rebekah, who will become Isaac's wife. So Rebecca is Isaac's first cousin once removed. And that is right because I looked it up. Okay. Google is wonderful. So Rebecca is Isaac's first cousin once removed. And we're going to stop there because we're out of time. And then we will pick up in January. Okay, so it is easier to see where God is leading when you know where God has been. And we can see that all the time with Abraham, where he was, what faith challenges he had, what faith challenges we have as well. All right. Thank you all very much.